Today we're going through the filming locations of Bronco Billy from 1980 compared to how they look 40 years later as of the fall of 2020. The film was shot all over Boise, Idaho and the Treasure Valley during the fall of 1979, and most of the locations are still here, but some are long gone, so I thought it'd be fun to document this since I hadn't seen anything about this movie on YouTube. This movie was a big deal to the local residents around that time. I was living here as a kid. I remember people talking about it, and Clint Eastwood was a big shot at the time, not only starring in this movie, but directing it and using thousands of locals as extras and even in speaking parts. Bronco Billy came out at a time when there were several modern-day Western-type storylines using cowboy character heroes that were released within a couple years' span. We'll be going through the locations in the order they appeared in the movie, so no doubt there will be spoilers if you haven't seen it. We're going to start out here on the Idaho border, looking over the Snake River into Oregon as the sun goes down. This is during the opening title shots. This is from the eastbound rest stop on the Idaho side of the Snake River. You can see Billy's tent set up in the foreground, and if you look off in the distance, you can see a faint outline of a lone mountaintop and a farmhouse that's right below it, and that will line up with the new shot of the area along with the roads and the property lines. Also, the shots of Bronco Billy's first show in the movie there were actually shot inside this tent at that location. Now, this passing shot we see is just off of Linder Road in between Meridian and Eagle, and this is right where Linder crosses the Boise River. There's a road there. Now, in the film, you can actually see traffic moving along that tree line back there, which would be Linder Road, which lines up with today's shot where you can see Linder back there along that same tree line, even though there's trees here in the foreground that have grown since that time. So this next passing scene is just a couple miles down the road, still on Linder, crossing over the North Fork of the Boise River. The bridge has been widened and, had some updating, but it still lines up nicely. Now, this next shot comes after the one you just saw chronologically in the movie. However, this tree line in front of them is the bridge that you just saw them cross over. Now, when Billy gets mad and he pulls over, this is actually back on Artesian Road from a few miles behind them. You can actually see the river in the movie if you look close through the trees there. Next scene is downtown Nampa, Idaho. They're heading south on 12th Avenue. The historic train depot is in the background there, and the Hong Kong Cafe can be seen in the old photo, and in today's photo, the Hong Kong is actually on the corner. It moved over one building, and you can tell by looking at this unique stair-step roof and smokestack back there. Here they are pulling up to old Nampa City Hall. This building was torn down in 1991. It's now a professional building that sits right on this block next to the new Nampa Public Library. There were some scenes shot in the inside of this old city hall, including the sheriff's office, and also when Leonard gets thrown into the jail, or the calaboose, as he likes to call it, which happens later in the movie. We're now at Shady Acres, just outside of Eagle, Idaho. This is a convenience store, motel, garage combo. There were scenes shot all over this property, including the exterior, in the motel, in the garage, and the salon. Since then, the store and motel have been torn down and rebuilt in the same spot. It's still called Shady Acres, but there's no longer a motel or the garage. It's just a store, gas, and there's a cafe there on the left side, which has some Bronco Billy memorabilia inside. One of the coolest things they had was the old Shady Acres wooden sign that hung out front for years. I remember that sign, and it's been replaced, but it is inside the cafe here. If you ever visit here, you'll see the cool pictures that are on the wall, and you might look at the menu there and get yourself a Bronco Billy burger, which we weren't able to try the day we were there. And also, the field across the street is where they set up the big tent for a show. We see them setting up the tent, but we never actually see the tent. This is the best shot I could get in the movie that showed any piece of it. Nowadays, the field has been developed for acreage homes. From here, Billy then heads off about 10 miles away to Meridian, Idaho, and the Hungry Onion Hamburger Drive-In. It has stayed very much the same since 1980. All the signage and even the trash cans are all original. However, much has changed around this place. The Thriftway grocery store in the background there is now an Idaho Youth Ranch donation and thrift store. The Meridian boat place there across the street, that lot has been turned into the Welcome to Meridian sign with a bunch of nice landscaping. The Hungry Onion also offers a Bronco Billy burger here on the menu, in case you didn't get one back there at Shady Acres. So this waitress that he also ends up hiring as his assistant introduces herself as Dolores, and Billy also clearly says Dolores, but her name in the credits at the end of the movie is Doris Duke. So not really sure what happened there, but something I just noticed. I also thought it might be fun to take a look at the difference in milkshake prices in the last 40 years. And the next scenes of Antoinette are shot back at Shady Acres in the motel and salon. Now Billy is back in Meridian, only a couple blocks north from the Hungry Onion at Farmers and Merchants State Bank. And you can see the big Zamzows mill is still there, but the Shell station is gone, and that Hoff building center is just an empty lot. Yeah, this bank was torn down just recently, and a new building is being built in the place. As Billy walks in, you get a view of Idaho Tent and Canvas as well as the bar next door. The canvas shop is now an aquarium store, and the bar is now called Bottle Cap Bar, but it's been a few different bars over the decades. This is leading us into what I think is one of the best scenes of the movie.
It's a stick-up!
All right, everybody up against the wall. You too, Tex. Come on, move! Move!
And you'll just have to watch it to see how that turns out. The young boy is played by Jeff Jewell, who my wife went to school with actually at Boise High. And he said in an interview that they had several of those piggy banks full of change for retakes of his stunt fall. But I guess he nailed it on the first take, and he was given one of those piggy banks to take home, which he said in the interview he still has. Now, Jeff was in another movie that was shot in Meridian and Boise around this same time called The Being. In this movie, he was also only in one scene. He was pushed down a couple times, interestingly enough. So yeah, it appears he had a short career doing movie stunts where he was shoved to the ground whilst holding something. He went on to become an attorney and a financial advisor. After the bank robbery, Billy gets interviewed by Newsbeat 7. Now, this is the local channel KTVB here in Idaho. The logo on the microphone gives it away. That's the same logo. They use a very similar one still. Also, Billy makes reference to the Wild West show being off of I-80. The highway at that time was actually called I-80N, but it was changed to I-84 the next year to avoid confusion with another I-80 that runs all the way from San Francisco to New York. And these next night driving scenes were shot on Highway 52 between Horseshoe Bend and Emmett. Next, we are out in Weiser, Idaho at the fictional St. Patrick's Orphanage. This is about an hour's drive from the Boise area. And this is another example of Eastwood's use of, a really neat looking property without showing the most notable and characteristic features. We see this multiple times in this movie, maybe just not wanting to reveal too much to, get tied to a specific location. During the lunch scene, Clint's real-life kids, Kyle and Allison Eastwood, sit with him at the table. The building is now a preschool and was never really used as an orphanage. We now are headed back to downtown Eagle, Idaho. Only a couple miles down the road from the Shady Acres location, we first see the historic Eagle Hotel built in 1910. Billy and Doc have a short conversation out in front. The building is now one of a few from that era in Eagle that still stands. This next shot shows Orville Jackson's Mercantile, which thrived for many decades in this location. It's now a bar and music venue called The Gathering Place. And because this was such a landmark for so long, they've kept all the exterior signage and murals, as well as the original hardwood floor inside. This scene where Miss Lily gets a newspaper from the front of Orville Jackson's, you can see the Bank Club, which is a bar at the time, built back in 1910, same time as the Eagle Hotel, which is directly across the street from this. Today, it's a restaurant called Da Vinci's. You can still recognize that unique roofline at the top. These next scenes were shot in the old Ada County Courthouse in downtown Boise. Even though they tell you it's Arizona, the courthouse has since been moved, but the building still stands and it's used as a law library. However, you can still see the jail bars over the windows on the top couple floors. The show then travels to Meridian Speedway. This is another example of not showing the most interesting features like the giant yellow water tower. We do get a couple small glimpses of it during different shots if you watch, but it's never really prominently shown in any scene. Also, a sign is visible reading Meridian County Fair. However, there is no such thing. Meridian is a city in the county of Ada. Behind the semi-trailers, you can see the stands, and the dirt area on the ground is actually part of the racetrack, just covered up with dirt for the shots. The grass you see is always there because that's actually the middle of the oval racetrack. This area they're driving out here is actually the pits where the car and drivers prepare for racing. I found a couple things that line up here with today's shot, which is on this light pole, you can see this interesting transformer type of thing that's mounted on there, as well as on the right side, you see that power line that's slightly leaning over. And in the background, you can see on the horizon there's a mountain, and the locals will know that as Freeze Out Hill, which is on your way to Emmett, Idaho. Here's a scene where this teenager starts a fire using fireworks, and the tent catches on fire, which causes the crowd to panic and start running for the exits. Now, naturally, the best thing to do in this situation is to go blazing in on your horse into the burning tent and start firing your gun into the air to gently coax the crowd of people outside to safety. In going through these scenes in slow motion, I just couldn't help but notice how happy and smiley this panicking crowd is as they run for their lives. We figured out that in this scene of the tent burning, this would have had to been shot from the top of the water tower. And just across the street, locals will recognize this as the original Meridian Ford location, as well as this little dark patch would be Story Park. Yeah, I also noticed in this scene of the next morning, you can clearly see the old Meridian Speedway scoreboard, which has long since been replaced. During their stay in Meridian, they end up going out to celebrate at a bar that's in Boise. However, the first shot here is the exterior, which is the Ranch Club in Garden City, which is kind of inside the Boise city limits. Now, this is showing the famous stallion on top, but that's the only scene used from this location. The interiors and the outside fight scene were all shot in a bar a few miles away called the Big Pine. It's now called the Dutch Goose. It was called Big Pine at the time. Interestingly, both of these bars were sold and had their names changed while we were producing this video. When the fight starts, you can see a mirror on the wall and a neon light outside that says Ranch Club, which made a lot of people think that there were scenes shot inside of the Ranch Club. But these are clearly shot at the Big Pine if you look at the small details. When the fight ends up outside, you can see the cinder block walls with that distinct diamond pattern on them. And also here, the door you can see as Leonard walks by. And the Dutch Goose was completely renovated a couple years ago and doesn't look anything like it used to. However, I did get some great finger steaks when we went in to get the pictures. When Billy meets the sheriff outside of town, they meet at the lower dam of Lake Lowell, just outside of Nampa. Now, this rock structure you see still stands there and has a Bronco Billy memorial mounted on it that has some information about the production and some of the other filming locations. So lining up the shots were pretty easy here since the area hasn't changed that much. In fact, I was able to find the exact rock stanchion that Billy stands in front of. If you look, all the grout lines match, they're just not as wide as they used to be. Now we are on Highway 21, driving from Idaho City towards Boise. I found this location actually on Google Maps. Kind of knowing which direction the river was flowing and what side of the road it was on, I knew there was only a couple places where that happened, so I just kind of kept following along until I found it. The very next scene is the caravan crossing Moore's Bridge, still on Highway 21, just down the road a ways, which takes you over Lucky Peak Reservoir. The bridge looks pretty much the same, except for the railings have been replaced. Next up is the train robbery scene shot out near Orchard Crossing, about 30 minutes east of the Boise Valley. Locals will know this road because the stage stop truck stop sits on this exit on I-84. The approaching train lines up almost perfectly with the current shot from the same viewpoint. There's a couple landmarks that make it easy for me to line up this shot. This water tower on the left and that lone mountain, which is out near Simcoe Road. This is the only place within a couple miles where the road crosses over the train tracks. So it's easy to tell that they shot this scene on a small stretch of track. I read accounts from people on the train saying they kept backing the train up and going over the same spot repeatedly. All the train passengers that were on the train boarded at the historic Boise train depot. Yeah, on my way to the filming site, I was driving by the water tower and a train actually came up at the same time and started going along with me. Just on the other side of the tracks from that water tower is the Idaho Potato Airbnb. And yep, you can rent a potato to spend the night in and make friends with Dolly the cow. This brings us to the Mountain Cove School building on the Boise VA Hospital campus. This property has changed a lot since the filming of the movie, but some of the key elements are still there. This building can be seen when Lefty and Miss Lily are walking together. I was looking for this long storage building where Miss Lily and Billy are walking, and I discovered this sign, which can't be clearly read, but you can see the words and the layout. Like you can see the top word is larger and there's a line on the top and bottom of it. And I was actually able to find this on the fence. It's still there, and it does look to be, 40 years old. And in the process of scrubbing through the frames of these scenes, I came across my high school drama teacher, who also worked as a horse wrangler on the film. Next, we end up at a little bar in Meridian. This quirky place is called Time for Two Bar, and it was located on the same property and owners as a towing company and a muffler shop. When I reached out to locals for information on this, there were no shortage of answers. This place is long gone, but used to be on the corner of Overland and Meridian Road. In one of the comments, a relative of the bar owner said they didn't like where the payphone was, so they put a fake one on the wall here by the restrooms. The real one can actually be seen in this scene. And also, IMDb, the Internet Movie Database site, lists the bartender as George Wendt from Cheers, which this is clearly not him. The commenters on the post identified him as Clint Schott, and he was active in Boise Little Theater, which is visible in our last location. This is Fort Boise baseball field, and the Boise Little Theater dome is visible right below the downtown Boise skyline. If the camera were to pan slightly to the right, you would actually see that Mountain Cove School location we were just at a few scenes ago. So Bronco Billy is not the best movie ever made, and some have even called it awful. But it touched a lot of people in the Treasure Valley area and also around the world. The message is uplifting. You can be anything you want to be. This is coming from Billy himself after he had admitted he'd been in prison and met the other performers of the Wild West show. This turned into a much bigger project than I expected, but it's been a fun ride. I got so many comments and shared memories each time I would ask a question on the local history Facebook group. It was just overwhelming, and I wish I could share it all. If you're interested in more anecdotal information and production details, there's a really great book that has loads of stories, information, plus all the filming locations that we visited. It's called On the Trail of Bronco Billy by Sandy Kirshner, and it's available on Amazon. Sandy also organized and raised the funding for the sign out there at the Lake Lowell location. I hope you enjoyed this little flashback, and if you made it to the end, thanks for watching.